Hey, welcome to another bonus episode of the Daring Creativity Podcast. I'm back to unpack some of the gems from this week's conversation, pulling out those moments that deserve a second look and digging deeper into what makes them special. It's about the ideas that hit different. This week, I sat down with Haraldur Thorleifsson, and I got to find out more about his prolific creative career so far, his background, and his life philosophies. The episode, published a few days ago, was titled Dare to Act Now. And the whole conversation is packed with experience and wisdom of a man who has achieved so much in his life despite having muscular dystrophy. If you haven't checked out a full interview yet, let me start with these 4 moments that stood out from our conversation.
There's a lot of different types of muscular dystrophy. The way mine is very slow moving. So it meant that when I was a kid, I had a walk that was different to most other kids. When I was a teenager, it became harder to walk upstairs. And then eventually, when I was about 25, I started using a wheelchair. And then slowly, my arms became less and less able to do things. And knowing that there was always, the current state is always the best there is, then I felt I should use my opportunities while I have them, not knowing I will be able to do in the future, but knowing what I can do right now. And I've always, when I think about should I do this later or should I do it now, it's always I should do it now because who knows? And I mean, that applies to everyone, but having that very obvious reference for me did really drive me towards action rather than thinking about doing something.
Haraldy's life and entire philosophy is shaped by muscular dystrophy, a progressive condition that continually reduces physical capability. Whilst most people abstractly understand mortality and limitation, Haraldy experiences a concrete, measurable decline that makes procrastination not just inefficient but potentially impossible. This quote challenges the perfectionist paralysis that haunts creative work. How often do we wait for better conditions or more resources or perfect timing? They are all illusions of control. Haraldy's experience proves that better conditions may actually never arrive. Today is the best day there is. This realization doesn't create despair. It actually creates urgency and gratitude. For creatives, this mindset obliterates the someday trap. Someday I'll start that book. Someday I'll start that project. I'll learn that skill someday soon. Haraldy demonstrated agency and possibility exist only in the present moment. His restaurant, his podcast, his music, and so many other creative projects that he's done, they all stem from refusing to defer dreams. The quote matters because it reframes limitation not as tragedy, but as clarity about what truly deserves finite energy.
I've never met a person that is not creative. I have met a lot of people who've been told that they're not creative, and I've met a lot of people who believe that they're not creative. But I've never met a person who's not creative. And then the second part of this is I think all creativity is connected.
The distinction between inherent capability and learned limitation strikes at the heart of creative gatekeeping. Haraldy identifies creativity not as a rare talent, but as universally human capacity, one that gets systematically suppressed through education, criticism, and cultural narratives about the creative types. This quote matters because it shifts responsibility from individuals to systems. People aren't born uncreative, they're taught to suppress their creative instinct through criticism, comparison, and rigid definition of what counts as creativity. A child building Lego cities is creating. An adult optimizing a spreadsheet is creating. Someone arranging their living room is creating too. We've simply created hierarchies that validate some forms while dismissing others. For Haraldy, this moment connects his generalist philosophy and Icelandic culture when necessity demands creativity from everyone. In a small population, you can't afford to declare half of the people not creative. This democratization of creativity matters profoundly in the age of AI and automation. If creativity is rare talent, most people are obsolete. If it's universal human capacity requiring only permission and practice, everyone has agency. The quote challenges leaders, educations, and individuals to ask, how are we suppressing creativity in ourselves and others through limiting beliefs? What would change if we assume everyone was creative and our only job was removing obstacles?
Meeting people where they are, working from there, I think is very important. And so understanding what motivates this person, what is it that they want to achieve, and then realizing sometimes that matches or can match with where we're going as a company or as a team, and sometimes it doesn't. And that doesn't have to be the fault of anyone, it just doesn't work. And so making sure that you're building a cohesive culture is extremely important. That doesn't mean that everyone is the same person. It means that there are core values, though, that you're aiming for, that we're all aligned on, to a degree at least. And if the people that come in that don't fit in, it's better for everyone if they move out sooner rather than later, because they won't be happy. The team around them won't be happy. And ultimately, it can break if you persist, because it, for the longest time, I felt I can change these people. I can change who they are. And I can, so despite evidence to the contrary, I would keep people on that weren't a good fit. And again, realizing it wasn't that they were bad people, that they weren't qualified, they just didn't fit into what we were doing.
In this moment of conversation, we talked about maturity, about leadership and human nature. And Hallie's moment matters because it addresses the savior complex common about empathetic leaders. I can change them often masks ego dressed as compassion. Hallie's acknowledgement that he persisted despite evidence to the contrary shows how strongly we cling to the belief that caring enough, trying hard enough, or being even smart enough can reshape anyone to fit our vision. His realization they just didn't fit removes the burden of transformation from both parties. Not everyone needs fixing. Some people are complete, capable, and still wrong for a particular environment. And this matters immensely for creative culture building. Trying to force fit damages both the individual and the team. Quick recognition and respectful transition serves everyone better. So this moment matters for self-knowledge. If you're a misfit, it doesn't mean you're broken.
I've been on Twitter for so long that I've been in so many different heated debates on Twitter that prepared me for that moment. That it wasn't, in the moment, it didn't feel that big. And after the fact, I felt proud of how I handled it, and I felt I did the best I could under in that situation, and it resolved itself in a way that I was satisfied with. And so I don't regret anything that I did there, and I feel made the right choices in a pretty heated moment. And again, it taught me a lot about who I am and who I can be in that situation. And I think there were so many things that led to that moment that helped me deal with it in the way that I did. And just having, not least having the different things that have happened in my life where was able to put this in context, that even though it got a lot of attention, this was very far from being the most important thing in my life.
In this part of the conversation, I told Harry about his high-profile fallout, call it a fallout, fight with Elon Musk, who then became the owner of Twitter and managed to fire Harley live via tweets, or they had a debate about it. But what was extraordinary about this experience and hearing about it, it was the emotional intelligence that it was a globally watched confrontation with Elon Musk that reached every news platform, BBC News, CNN, everywhere. And it made Halley a household name overnight. And when I asked him about how he dealt with it, he demonstrated how many years of smaller challenges, even wasting time in Twitter debates, compounded into capacity for much bigger ones. Because imagine yourself having a high-profile fight with Elon Musk on Twitter. It was every difficult conversation before this incident that was Halley's resilience building. And more profoundly, Halley's ability to contextualize reveals trauma unexpected gift. Having lost his mother at 11, managed alcoholism, and navigated progressive disability, He possesses calibrated perspective on what constitutes a real crisis. Public humiliation by a billionaire? Stressful, but not life or death serious. This matters enormously in our catastrophizing culture, where social media trains us to treat every conflict as existential. Halley demonstrates proportional response, taking situations seriously enough to handle well, but not too seriously so it can paralyze you or define you. He maintained his own narrative while the world wrote theirs. It is the ultimate creative act of authoring your story regardless of external chaos. If you haven't checked out a full episode, I encourage you to do so. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next one. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more accessible resources to help you discover your daring creativity, you can pick up one of my books on themes of mindful creativity, creative business, branding, and graphic design. Every physical book purchase comes with a free digital bundle including an ebook and audiobook to make the content accessible wherever you are and whatever you do. To get 10% of your order, visit novemberuniverse.co.uk and use the code PODCAST. Have a look around and start living daringly.